Alright, hello everyone. This video we're gonna be discussing the orb nerfs. Personally, I wasn't sure about how effective the orb nerf was gonna be because, of course, while we see the numbers, we see the changes, and we have a rough idea that it's gonna be reducing a good chunk of the damage. It is definitely a big nerf. We weren't sure about like how effective it's gonna be, and I imagine we're gonna need to test more to see that in practice. But I decided to run some calculations because I actually had never put the numbers of like the orb on paper, right? I never put the numbers straight up on my screen to see what it does. And after trying a little bit and like rechecking the math because I was getting flabbergasted, I still think orb is gonna be a menace because okay, let's start. What changed? First thing, Stellar Dash had got that nerf from 10% to 8% on the passive a few patches ago, which was basically nothing, right? And now it got straight up nerfs on its percentage damage and flat damage from the main skill and the orb skill that comes from it. On top of it, it got some other nerfs. Let's just cover these other nerfs really quick because they are important. The Supernova doesn't reduce the movement speed to 0 anymore. It reduces 80%. So that means the enemies now can move inside the orb, which is a pretty big deal because that means enemies that get pulled to the center are not going to be all stuck on the same place during the entire duration because they can move even if they are slowed. They can move a little bit, and then that can definitely make you miss a lot of shots from the Stellar Dash. But even then, it's still gonna be a very strong skill. It's gonna still be a very good control skill. Still does decent chunk of damage, so it's still a very strong skill. It's just definitely a big nerf for it as well, and it makes the Stellar Dash less consistent. Let's say like that for combos, right? The nerf on the attack thing, on the projectiles, went from 12 to 9, so it just lost 25% damage, basically, extra damage, right? But it doesn't matter too much unless you're really using a bunch of auto attacks, which some classes do use, I guess. The other big nerf was on the multiplier for the spheres from 35 to 25%. This one, I thought it was going to be a much bigger nerf, but while it does it is a sizable nerf overall for the entire class. When it comes to your main damage, the Stellar Dash itself, it really doesn't matter that much. And the last one was the bonus damage from the heavy, going from 26% bonus heavy to 20% bonus heavy, which I honestly, it is a damage loss, but again, is not that big of a deal. I'm gonna be showing you my calculations. I hope some of those are wrong, honestly, because they are insane. And I'm gonna explain why I don't think this is gonna change anything, personally. To start, what changed was like we had the player percentage from Stellar Dash is gonna be like 680 per like beam and 240 flat. It changed to 580 and 210 flat. So there's a pretty big change, right? Pretty big change. Let me just confirm if it's that change. Yeah, it is. Okay. 580. And the orb damage, so the Stellar Dash that comes from the orb, went from 272% to 191% and 96 flat to 69 flat. So what I calculated here was the damage from the player, the damage from the orb, from the Stellar Dash, the damage from the player with satellite just by himself, the damage of the player plus satellite on a group of 6, including the player, the player plus 3 orbs, and then the player plus 3 orbs and satellite by himself, and finally the biggest damage possible, the player with 3 orbs and satellite with a group, like 6 people on satellite plus your 3 orbs, which is the most insane damage possible. Of course, it requires party play, but it's just busted. It is broken. Let's just be straightforward from that. So I calculated everything. Those are the percentages that you're gonna be getting on your skill damage, and these are the flat on like all the scenarios. The total 3x is from shooting 3 times, so 3 rays, right? Like pew pew pew. It's not taking into consideration the enemy defense, the enemy flat damage reduction, the anything like evasion, whatever. It's not taking into consideration skill damage boost, skill damage resist, nothing. No, this is just theoretically the flat damage that you do if defense and other things didn't exist. All right. So I decided to play around a little bit with damage numbers, and I just threw here. I just compared the three main ways it would be doing damage in Magic, which is placing 3 orbs and shooting, or placing 3 orbs and satellite and shooting, or placing 3 orbs and satellite in your group and shooting, right? That's the main ways are usually going to be using Stellar Dash. So I decided to put here damage for 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. Consider this that it's your max damage / crit, right? So with this you can have a better idea of your damage. So before, oh, by the way, this is with 3 rays, okay, 3 pew-pews. So this is your total damage. So before, just by yourself and 3 orbs, you would do 28,000 damage with 600 base, max, whatever. And now you do 22,000, so you lost 6,500 damage, which is a considerable amount to lose. It's like right around 20 to 25%. Just on the flat, not taking into consideration the other buffs, or the other skills and passives that got nerfed. This one is with satellite, 41,000 to 33,000. You can see it's a pretty big loss here, but at the same time, like I said, still good damage. And the biggest one, which is expected because it's group, right? It went from 93,000, which is insane, by the way, to 76,000. So you lost like, what, 20,000 damage? Almost 20,000 damage. So it's a lot of damage loss. Is, like I said, a pretty big deal. But take into consideration that this is just your flat damage. This doesn't take your damage boost from stacking piercing, from stacking stellar dashes. Neither your pierce damage that does stack and increase your damage, right? All right. So I decided to, from this, do a calculation involving heavy, create damage boost from these packs to see what would be your damage. And that's why I think it's not gonna change anything if you're using this mostly in party play or playing around your stellar dashing satellite groups, because I think the biggest problem on the orb, of course, a lot of people complain about the supernova explosion, the orbs being everywhere, getting stuck, blah blah blah. But when it comes to the actual damage part, the actual brrr that deletes everyone, it's the stellar dash. It's not the supernova, and the stellar dash is never gonna change until satellite changes. So in my opinion, satellite on the orb is mega broken. It can make your whole party get like 50k to 100k shields if you're building the Oracle for the healer, right? And if you're building for damage, it can make your damage output multiply by like so many times. So let's put this in practice here. I'm gonna be using this 600 as max damage, as base damage for the calculation, because you can see on my character here, my Lunarch or Dagger, I get 590. I can get to 600 if I change some of the status and some other things, but regardless, I just decide to round to 600. And if I take into consideration 600 as my max damage, right? These are the damage that I would do. I already showed you this on the last page. But on this page, I decided to include the 80% damage boost from the passive, the spec from the skill actually. But be aware that this is very inflated because you need to stack this damage boost. That means your first ray is gonna do 8% more, then your second gonna do 16% more, then your third gonna be 25% more. So it's a scaling thing, which means like the least stellar dashes that you have, the least pew-pews that you shoot, the least effective it is. So for example, if you're playing with only by yourself, only satellite or only 3 orbs, you're just shooting 5 lasers or 4 lasers, right? So it takes way longer and you use way less of the stack effectiveness. So theoretically, actually, this is like probably half of the damage on these lower ones and a little bit slight lower on the satellite for the group ones. So take this with a big grain of salt. It should be instead probably something like 50% damage boost or even lower for the with the less rate ones, the less stellar ones. Sorry, it's a bit confusing to say the names. But regardless, I just decided to do the flat amount just so I could calculate really quick to see where it leads. And you can see just with the damage boost, it goes to insane numbers. And that happens because honestly, this is, like I said, not only needs to ramp up, to scale up with this passive, this specialization, sorry, but he also needs to hit the same target 10 times, which sounds okay until you realize how slim, how thin the actual Stellar Dash rays are, and how easy it is like to just parry it, or to move like one step in front of it, or just to dash forward with like your parry, right, and make the entire thing lose the stacks basically. So this is a very hypothetical situation, but I do want to include to show the possible damage. Then I wanted to include the crit damage. For example, me using Lunarch, I have 60% critical damage by base. Then I can increase by 15% using the artifact when I hit shields, which happens like all the time, right? It's just how the game works. And I get extra 15% by critting and stacking up to 10 times. So it is, again, very hypothetical because I would need to proc the artifact and to stack the maximum on my Blood Hunter, but it is possible to reach 90%, so I just included that on top, so to see, and you can see you are already hitting like insane numbers when you're playing group. You can do it upwards to 260,000 damage post-nerf. So you can see that it's absolutely absurd, and I can see why when I was playing groups and spreading the satellite and just clicking, a lot of times the feed would just go insane because it's so much damage going like in the same direction that anyone in that cluster point where all the rays connect instantly gets melted because it's so much damage. It's just so much damage, because this is without considering heavy attacks. So if you consider heavy attacks, you can see it go even post-nerf. It went from 640,000 damage to 520,000 damage. Like, it's a 120,000 damage loss from the nerf, but it's still like for 520,000 damage. When I start calculating things, I couldn't believe it. It's just too insane. But when you take into consideration how prevalent it is on PvE, how dominant it is on PvE, it starts making sense. This is your potential damage. This is absurd, but of course it's your potential damage. It's not the damage that you're going to be able to use all the time, but the fact that you can reach and do this amount of damage is insane. And again, this is without considering the heavy increase here, so from without satellite 26 or 20% post nerf, right? And without taking into consideration as well from the passive on the orb damage buff, from like the active one on the right top, from 35% to 25%, but even then, that's 25% extra damage on the 3 orbs Stellar Dash that you're shooting, and the other skills of course, but mostly on the Stellar Dash. So this should actually be increased even further, like the damage on all of this should be increased by probably around 10%, I imagine, because it just increases the orb damage, and then by upwards 20% from your heavy from the seer. So this potentially could reach upwards to what, 650, 700,000? It's insane. I actually didn't keep calculating because it started getting too complicated, honestly, for my levels of like Excel. But you can see the idea behind here. It's absurd. It's like insane. Honestly, I think the only way you're gonna fix orb is by cutting the satellite group spread, or at least nerfing, so when you're doing the satellite, it counts as an orb proc instead of a player slash satellite proc. Like the ray from the Stellar Dash from the orb does so much less damage than the player one. Maybe if that was damage for the satellite, it would fix all the problems because it would cut the damage by half, which is insane, but you know, it's fair in my opinion. Or just making the satellite more limited. Like, I feel like this satellite right now is breaking the game when it comes to like shielding. It's giving way too much shield for like way too quick and way too like easy to apply, and the same goes for the Stellar Dash. If you have a composition that plays around your seer, around your satellite, if more than one person in your party has satellite, it gets really easy to have an uptime of like on your satellite on everyone, and always have pressure to do your max potential damage all the time. It's like you always have rotation to wipe a bunch of people just by clicking one key that just shoots 9 lasers from like all over the place, right? So personally, I think we still need to see more, but I don't think this is gonna change anything. I actually don't think. I think it was a very good nerf. It was like a very big deal. You definitely lost like 20 to upwards to 30% of your damage. Around 25 would be my guess. But you still have the potential to do so much damage, like so much over the top damage, that this will not matter. And I actually think even on PvE, even with all the nerfs here, I still think Crossbow Orb is gonna be the top class on PvE. Just from checking numbers here, of course, I didn't calculate the other PvE classes. Maybe or not Oracle, Enigma is gonna do better. Maybe even Oracle is gonna do better because those two are also doing great on PvE. But again, the Orb has been nerfed on those two, so it doesn't affect. Like all after it got affected, I don't think Invocator or any PvE class is gonna come even close to what Orb is doing right now. I still think X-Bow Orb is gonna be like the top dog. But that's about it. That's just, of course, my vision, my conclusions from doing this over-the-top calculations. This could be more technical, and I'm sorry if that's not enough proof or not enough numbers for you. But this is what I could like skim over the top from doing calculations and checking the base numbers and trying to throw like other formulas on the middle of it. And personally, I think a 25% damage nerf is not enough when it comes to party play. I think when it comes to playing by yourself, you're playing Battlegrounds, you're playing solo or like small ZVGs, or not ZVGs, GVGs, or like, not even GVGs, but like skirmishes. It is a pretty big nerf, like you're gonna feel the damage loss. Well, when it comes to like setups that you have proper statics, you have proper parties to spread satellite, to play around your orbs, to move together so you can like just move as a unit and just like have 50 to 100,000 shields, and shooting like lasers that can do upwards to 500,000 damage. Yeah, you're still gonna mow down everyone. It's gonna be very similar to how PvE feels. You just spread satellite, you place your orbs, and you just anyone in front of you, and it's gonna melt anyone in front of you. This damage nerf is not significant enough for the static party play to be unviable or bad. It's still gonna be insane, probably better than a lot of things. I still think it's insane. But one thing that must be said here from this conclusion, it is actually a very heavy nerf on the scaling of it. So, for example, you can see that for 100 to 600 damage here, while the damage loss, the nerfs actually made from the scaling much worse on the Orb. That means classes, for example, Enigma. Enigma was doing really well, right? Because Staff has a lot of damage, base damage, and can increase base damage. So that was like being beneficial for both classes. But now it's definitely gonna be way less effective for Orb compared to what it was before. So it was a pretty big nerf on the scaling part of the Orb, which I think it's fair. But I really think if they wanna adjust the Orb, at least in party play, they need to stop nerfing the Orb itself on damage, because I think the damage part right now is okay. I think what they need to nerf is the group damage play on the Orb. They need to nerf the satellite doing 1 bazillion damage, because it doesn't count as an Orb Stellar Dash, it counts as a player Stellar Dash. If you just change the satellite damage from being a player Stellar Dash to a Orb Stellar Dash, that's already going to be a pretty big nerf. Or if you nerf overall satellite entirely, because, like I said, this is a skill that definitely breaks the game. And nerf Shadow Step as well, please. But that's about it. This video is way longer than I wanted, but I hope this makes sense for you. And see ya!